for joining me today, Simone, and for being here for all the parents who are going to watch this. And yeah, if you can just start to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about you and your journey with Montessori.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I love this initiative because Montessori parents need a lot of support. I wear lots of hats. I am a Montessori mother mostly, as first and foremost, I say. I have two children, Oliver and Emma, and they're now 18 and turning 17. And I've raised them in a Montessori way since that they were small children. And then 15 years ago, I started working as a Montessori teacher, and I run my own school now in Amsterdam called Jacaranda Tree Montessori, which is a parent-child program. So parents come with their children. And then I put also a lot of things online to help parents all around the world to introduce Montessori into their homes. So that's through the Montessori Notebook, and I run online courses there, as well as just having published a book called The Montessori Toddler, all about our toddler friends.
Yeah, you're quite busy. I think really that book has made a big buzz, isn't it, in the Montessori community and for parents. It's always recommended in my group, and I haven't read it because I missed the deadline. Every time you post that you have like that amount of books available, when I make the decision, okay, I'm going to order it, no, then it's out of stock. Nearly every time it was out of stock. So
the good news is it's going to be online and available from March in 2019. So everyone will be able to, they won't run out of stock again.
No, that's a good news. Absolutely. I'm very happy for you that it's like has been picked up by a publisher because it's really deserve it. And yeah, I'm waiting for that book to be available again.
Well, I think just to give you an idea, like lots of parents were asking me, like, what book should I read? And I kind of had to say, can you read a little bit of this book for, you know, how you can speak with your kids? And this is a quite good book on some Montessori activities, but not really for that age group. And I had to keep I'm just going to now put all the answers to the questions in a really beautiful, accessible way, but also much deeper than you can just share on Instagram. So I'm really happy with how it turned out. And a Japanese illustrator helped me do the book layout. So it doesn't really look like a parenting book. It just feels fun to read. And yeah, it's been great that so many people have found that helpful.
Yeah, and that age group as well, because I've noticed that many parents discovered Montessori around the time their children are 2.
Yeah, I was going to write a book more about Montessori in general, and then all of a sudden I'm like, but I work with toddlers and I love toddlers. I need someone to stand up for toddlers. So yeah, let's see if it's interesting. And I think that really appeals exactly as you're a new parent and you find that out. It's just a good handbook to come back to. There's
Absolutely. Yeah, and obviously, yes, I'm a big fan of your work in general, so I'm sure I will love that book. So maybe you can tell us why you choose a Montessori education for your children, because I think it first started that way. You decided to offer that education to your own children and kind of fell in love with the Montessori education, like many of us. So if you want to explain that process.
Well, exactly. I went to a very traditional school, and I remember putting up my hand saying, is this in the test? And if it wasn't in the test, then we didn't even listen to what was going on. And I'm an idealist, and I wanted more for my children. I wanted them to, you know, fall in love with learning and to be engaged. To have fun when they were at school. And when I had heard about Montessori, we went to an open day and we immediately fell in love. It's like, oh, look at this classroom. It's so beautifully inviting and calm. And the teachers were just adorable. They were so kind with the children and with ourselves. And so we thought, oh, we'll just do that for preschool. And all of a sudden, years later, you know, they did all of their primary school in Montessori. And it's just been a great thing. And we just live Montessori, I think, by the time you have been in Montessori such a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. And so now they are, as you say, 17 and 18. So you have those, I suppose, the opportunity to reflect on how it has influenced them, because they went to all the primary with Montessori, which I hope I'm going to be able to notice more and more, because my own son is in a primary school, and Montessori primary school. So yeah, I'm really enjoying the elementary years and the elementary curriculums that I'm not familiar with. Like you, birth to 6. So I didn't know anything about elementary, so it's all new, but I can see I'm in a bit of a situation, like for my first child, for my daughter, when it came up to the time when we had to choose a school, we couldn't choose a Montessori school. I couldn't homeschool either. So she went to a mainstream education, and when we had the opportunity to to send my second to a Montessori school, we asked her, do you want to change? But she didn't want to, obviously. She was already, you know, in year 4. I don't know the equivalent in the Netherlands, but basically she was, you know, too far in a school system to want to change. So basically I kind of see some difference, but, you know, not enough years have passed for me to really know yet. But, you know, I was curious to have your opinion because, yeah, you have 2 children who went through, who are now 17 and 18. So maybe you can reflect a bit on that.
Well, I think that just starting when they're very small, and it's really not, it is about materials, like, you know, knowing what to play with and not, but also I just think it's more about how we are as a family. So introducing them, like having that practical life basis where you use including children in your daily life and they help around the home, but you connect together and you live slowly and you really try and focus on making memories rather than accumulating things. These are the kind of things I think have influenced our family and how they've grown. They're curious. We have super interesting conversations with them as teenagers. The teenage years were surprisingly lovely and not at all like having to roll my eyes. And, you know, the first time that I had my son kind of go, oh, Mom, I thought, oh, I need to open all the books and I need to find out what's going on. And actually, if you lay down all the principles in the early years, like that they know, for example, that they have this freedom within limits that we talk about a lot in Montessori, that they have a lot of responsibility and possibility and they're enormously capable. But on the other hand, I'm also going to set a limit to keep them safe. Then when they get to the teenage years, it's exactly the same. It's like they have a lot of freedom. They have their bikes here in Amsterdam, so they can cycle around the city and meet up with friends and come back from school in time for dinner. But at the same time, if they're going to be out past 10 o'clock, then I'm going to come and cycle over to meet them. Or if they are going to put themselves into danger, then I have to say, yeah, it's not okay for you guys to go rent a sailing boat because you're only 16 years old, something like that. So,
and I think that's something, no matter the school you choose, when you discover Montessori, as parents, we're going to try to instill that freedom within limit and that constant reflection about our actions. And I can see that for both my children, despite that I have one who doesn't go to Montessori school, you know, we always help her to reflect on our actions and to make decisions for herself. And even so, I think when they go to mainstream schools, they are kind of used to be told what to do. And so it's like at home, we kind of do the opposite. So she's between 2 systems like that. But I do believe that parents have the greatest influence in the end.
Yeah, and I think that's also reassuring for parents who can't afford Montessori school or don't have Montessori nearby. It's how you live with your family. And so you can apply any of these principles whether or not they go to Montessori school. And if your children are lucky to get to go to Montessori school, then they do get that freedom to choose what they want to work on when they're in their classroom, that they work with hands-on materials that in a concrete way, which I think is so important, so different with how we traditionally learn. So when you always stand at the front of the classroom as a traditional teacher and tell everyone what you need to know, you're not trusting that the child actually wants to learn, and that if you set out beautiful materials that are, you know, the curriculum in Montessori is very deep and well prepared, so that mathematics, for example, you know, goes from very easy and scaffolds each step. So Montessori is not just like you get to do anything. They're working on really engaging materials that will also help them academically eventually as well. So they get the soft skills and also a lot of knowledge.
Yeah, and I do believe that schools in general are changing. So we can see some kind of snippets of they want to make the children more creative. So they are trying. I kind of see that the school curriculum is trying to change. So hopefully, you know, there are some influence from Montessori coming in the mainstream somehow. I can see that in early years. In the Facebook group I admin, there are many early years teachers who are interested by Montessori education and who are trying, you know, within the limit that they can do in a mainstream education, but they're really trying to implement more practical life in the classroom with the little one, more hands-on activities, and, you know, they try to really do their best to implement that in the classroom. So I think that's quite of a nice evolution. It seems to come back into the system somehow, because obviously parents and teachers are more aware, so they're kind of asking for that somehow. I don't know how you see the movements in Holland. How is it popular? And the Montessori movement?
Yeah, so Dr. Montessori did live in the Netherlands, and a lot of her family is still here, actually.
Yeah.
So it's really beautiful. What's amazing is that there's 20 Montessori primary schools alone just in Amsterdam, where I live, for a population of like 800,000. And so it's quite comprehensive. And also what's amazing is in the public system. So it's not private schooling. And I don't really know that exists many other places in the world. So that it really makes Montessori accessible no matter what social background you're from. So I think that's really important and really beautiful. The only downside to that is that because in the public education system, maybe the materials aren't perfect, because they don't have the resources that you do have when you have private funding. And the Montessori qualifications are slightly different here. So we don't have many or any AMI schools except for one in near The Hague. And so the quality of the teachers is slightly lower than maybe an AMI training. But I still am really happy with the Montessori education my children received here from the age of 4 to 12. So I think it's wonderful that Montessori is so well known here, and it really fits well with the Dutch way that they bring up their children, about giving children a lot of independence and freedom, as well as stepping in when they need to.
Is it allowed to homeschool in Holland? So
it's actually very difficult to homeschool, so you end up going to a school. Yeah, I
think that's a bit the same in Germany. They cannot homeschool, but schools can choose the kind of curriculum or the way they teach. So they have also many Montessori public school and Steiner's public school. So that makes the system totally different, obviously, when they are more freedom in the way they can choose to teach, basically. Yeah, so hopefully, these kind of countries will show a good example, and that will, spread elsewhere. That's a bit my hope, because I think that, as you say, a private school or homeschooling is not always possible. And it started to be a movement that was supposed to transform the schools. It was never supposed to be a private system. So.
Yeah, and I think that in America at the moment there are more public schools opening up. So I think that definitely the more that children have access to it, the more it will grow. Like you say, there's a lot of interest now with parents going, I don't actually want my children to have the same schooling experience. And so Montessori, it's great. It's spreading. And I think even social media, much as everyone says it can be a terrible thing, it's also been great for the Montessori movement, because we have been able to share what we learn as Montessori teachers with just families around the world, people listening to this conference, for example, which when I found out about Montessori, the only people I could learn from were from the teachers just directly in my classroom, and a couple of books. But you really had to go back to, I love Dr. Montessori's writings, but as you're a tired parent, they're really hard to read, so it's kind of like, how do I put this into practice? What does she mean? And how would that apply for my toddler? Because she's written a lot about the 3 to 6 age and finding it all. I think that Montessori would just continue to grow and be applied. And maybe, I think it is nice to have proper Montessori schools. I get a little bit worried when people are a bit Montessori inspired, because it really works best when you have mixed age children, for example, because without older children in the classroom, modeling for the younger children in the classroom, then you will find that it gets watered down. Having 33-year-olds in the classroom would be really, really intense, all trying to, work with the red rods and they're using them as weapons, where they need really, older children to model how appropriately to use some materials. So I think that it's really, it's great that it's spreading, and I think it will be lovely that proper Montessori schools also, continue to grow and thrive, and also more high school opportunities, I think, as well. Because there are high schools here. There are high schools here in the Netherlands, but they're more like, we call them urban compromises, and they still have like the same textbooks that other high schools would have, but just that they have more freedom how they want to work through them. And my children didn't choose for that, because they're like, well, that doesn't sound super interesting to just work through a textbook by yourself. So I think there's many more interesting programs. There's one in Belgium, actually. The International Montessori School there has a beautiful IB-based Montessori high school, which is beautiful.
Oh, wow. Well, that's so surprising. I left Belgium 12 years ago, and there was nothing about Montessori, just that Montessori school in Brussels and one just outside Brussels, and that was mainly for international families.
Yeah, this unfortunately is in the international system, so it's expensive, so it's not accessible to everyone, but I think it would be a really great model for us to spread around the world.
Yeah, but it has started to be in the public system as well in Belgium, surprisingly, because when some schools are failing, basically in Belgium, they start to have less children and less funding, talking about public schools, and because they are in some specific areas where, and you can choose any schools in Belgium. You don't have to choose the local school. So parents were like choosing, the best schools in the area, or were happy to travel to drop their children to another public school that was apparently better. And so some schools were like struggling to have children and were like threatening to be closed. So they started to look at other curriculum and apply to be more Montessori, basically, and to apply the Montessori curriculum. And so more and more public schools have a Montessori system for the early years, because we start school at 2.5 years in Belgium. So they have like the first 3 years as a Montessori classroom, basically, with a mixed age group and all the materials and the Montessori trained teachers. And so it's becoming more available publicly in Belgium, which is surprising because when I left, nobody was talking about homeschooling. Private schools were not existent in Belgium, very rare. So now, started to spread in Belgium, surprisingly as well. Yeah, well, you talked a bit about the teenage years, so I don't know if you have anything else to say about those years, any advice for parents?
I think that, teenagers are just like toddlers. So Montessori actually talks about 4 planes of development, 0 to 6. There's similarities in the development here. Then 6 to 12, there's similarities, 12 to 18, and 18 to 24. And the 2 planes, 0 to 6 and the 12 to 18, she called them parallel. And basically it means that during those 2 periods, there's a lot of growth and change. So you see a baby, for example, they start from birth without being able to walk or talk or, feed themselves, and they go all the way through to 6, and they've developed a full communication, developing their own personality. Between 12 and 18, you also see an enormous physical change. They go from boy to man, girl to woman in that period. And just as a baby is working on their independence, going from, being dependent on their parent to being an independent, separate from their parent, then in the teenage years, you have a similarity because you have the teenagers increasing their social development. And I just want to reassure parents that it doesn't just happen overnight, that they get to 12 and all of a sudden they're out of the house all the time. So really, I think in the first year of high school, there was definitely interest in, being more social, but it would be more for an afternoon with their friends and then they'd come back. And then in the next year, they maybe had more sleepovers and then came back. And then sometimes by the time my son left high school, he went to Portugal with friends at the end of their exams, and then they come back. So the trips get bigger and longer. But what's really nice is we're still like a safe base for them to return to. And like we've just celebrated the New Year, and over this 2-week school holiday period, it's been really cozy just to get to spend time with the children, their friends, their girlfriends, boyfriends, and even the parents of their friends. So it's a really lovely time. I think they need some independence. I think it's hard sometimes where you don't have bikes, for example, and parents have to drive their children to all of their appointments. Maybe a way, like think about how you can still give your children some independence, because my children just love being able to get themselves home. They don't want to be picked up. They need that space. And that's been really important for them. But what I've also found is it's not like, oh, I got to the teenage years, I don't need to do anything. What I find is I actually need to be home a lot. And so after my classes, I'm always around the house, and they might go off to their room and be chatting with friends for a couple of hours. But when you come back, then they really want to connect. And I'm really enjoying our meal times at the moment because they're like an hour long, and I'm having these really nice conversations with them. So it's like, I wouldn't say quality over quantity, because it's not even that, but it's just being still available, not just getting too busy. So that's been my experience anyway of the teenage years, that it's been really nice. And like we said before about setting limits, I think that's become quite an important thing. It's like, how can you yeah, how can you give them the freedom? Like, I want to go to a concert. My daughter was 14 and she wanted to go to a concert in with just a friend who I didn't know so well in the middle of Amsterdam. And it's like, I want you to be able to go to the concert, but I also need to keep you safe. And so also appreciating kind of using an NVC model, like the nonviolent communication, where you recognize that two people have needs, and my need is to keep my kids safe, and their need is to go out and be social and try new things and, you know, explore and see the world around them without, you know, when you're 15, you think you know everything. So they need to have that feeling that they know everything as well. And so we were able to then find a way that she could go to the concert. They came around here and had pizza together before they left, so that I knew the girls she was going with a bit better. They let me cycle with them to the venue, and I dropped them off so that, you know, no one saw me dropping them off. And I waited, you know, in a cafe nearby so I could see them get in okay. I told my daughter about what the risks were about having her drink spiked and things like that. And she turned out to be so nervous that she didn't even have a drink anyway, and the bar was too busy. And yeah, so she got to go to the concert, and then I had agreed that I would be outside at 11 o'clock, and I wasn't the only parent to be there. So they got to go to the concert, but I also had some things. I can't keep them 100% safe, but I can do some things. And then, like I said before, like, but if I can't find a way for them to go sailing or with friends at 16 on a boat, not really because I don't trust my children. It's more like I don't trust that there might be a storm and that, you know, one of them's a strong enough sailor, and, you know, environmental elements that I can't control. So then I can say, I've really tried to find a way. I was going to come and stay nearby, blah, blah, blah. But this time I have to say no. Then they really respect that too, and they find another possibility.
Yeah, and as you say, if you are connected to your children and stay connected to your children, you are there for them. They're going to obviously be okay with you telling them, you know, what is safe and what is not safe. And that's probably one of the issues that parents of teenagers talked about, that they don't have any connection anymore because, you know, the children are grown up, and, you know, when they are very little, you have the physical connection, as you said. It's not automatic to have the connection. And then when we work with parents with difficulties with their teenagers, it's about that. They don't have anything in common with their teenagers. They don't do anything anymore together. So it's like always in the back of my head, how do I keep, you know, something that is interesting with my children that we have in common. Like, for now, my daughter, she's just 11, so she's slowly getting there for sure. We can see the changes happening. And for example, she's a big fan of Harry Potter, and I'm not. I have to say, I'm not. I never read the book or anything, but I really try, you know, to be interested when she talked about it. We watch the movie together because I want to have something, you know, in common. So I cannot be as passionate as she is, but definitely I indulge in those passions because I want her to just want to talk to me about these things, because later on I want her to be able to talk to me about the big things as well. That's something we say quite often, you know, if you don't let your child talking to you about the little things when they are little, they will not talk to you about the big things when they're like teenagers. I don't know if you've heard that, yeah.
Yeah, and I think also like continuing to apply the same principles from when they were toddlers through to teenagers is like I'm their guide as when they're toddlers. So I'm not taking it personally if they kind of have a tantrum because they are upset with what went wrong. And just similarly, if they have a hormonal outburst, I'm not going to take that personally. I'm going to say, I see it, that it's hard for you. Like it's hard. It's not hard. It's hard for me to see you having a hard time. That's basically what I say to them. Let me know if I can do anything for you. And my daughter will go off and kind of go in her room to calm down. And my son would rather like hang out, and, you know, he still even gives me a cuddle. So that's nice. But, you know, so they just experience things differently. But I don't take it personally. And they know then that I can be that rock even when they're kind of in an emotional roller coaster. Sometimes they don't even know like why all of a sudden they just exploded, because you know, that's hormones and teenagers and not really understanding and getting to know yourself. So I think I love that part actually. And whilst it's always fun doing, you know, fun things and making kids happy, it's also really an honor when you can help them when they've been having a hard time as well. Yeah,
we have to be there for both sides, basically. That's our role as parents, I guess.
I hope that's helpful.
Yeah, it is helpful. And it's reassuring, you know, to have the experience of you having been through those years already, well, it's not finished, because teenage years, we said that we are adult around 24, according to Maria Montessori, so we still have a bit of time. But, it's reassuring because many, teenage years, it's really something that's frightening parents. I think even more maybe than the toddler years. But, we can be reassured that if we have a good connection with our children, there is no reason that's going to totally change during those teenage years, obviously.
And also, I think you'll see that the children are enormously capable, like, because they have been raised in a Montessori way, they can, like, now my son has moved out of home so he can go to university, and he's organized his own internet to, with the house, and set all of that up. They cook every night, they take turns, and, I send him off with a recipe book of all our home recipes, and he's really proud to say, oh yeah, I cooked the boys burritos and that went down well. And like, why did you only say that was enough for 3 people when I cooked the corn fritters? And he's really playing house and doing all the things in a very capable way, and he lives 2.5 hours away, so I can't do his washing for him or clean the house. So it's great to know that all of the groundwork that we put in also comes out in raising capable, curious, responsible humans. So
yeah, absolutely. And that's a bit the goal. Actually, I remember, I think my mom tried to make me do stuff when I was little, but she was also a kind of a feminist, so she had the idea that I should pay someone to do my stuff at some point. That was her idea as feminist. So she didn't teach me how to iron, she didn't teach me how to sew, and I kind of regret that, because I think that's so important. So I was totally clueless when I left home. So I think that's why Montessori was very attractive for me, because I really wanted my children to be able to be capable, basically, and to be independent, and not to learn everything at 23, which was my case. Just my mom was very much about educations and having, going to university and reading and stuff like that. But the practical life, she thought it was like better to hire somebody to do it for me. That was her ideas of feminism. Yeah, it's very individual, I guess, but that means that she didn't teach me all those things that she was well able to do. So yeah, but I have really that desire that my children should be really capable when they are grown up, and yeah, that's what we're working on all the time. So do you have a favorite Montessori quote just to share with us?
Actually, I had to look it up because it's quite wordy, but it's basically about what we were talking about before, about working with the hands, because I think that so much traditional education is based on rote learning, or the teacher telling you a formula and not discovering something for yourself. And this hands-on concrete learning that we start with when we work with toddlers, but right through, you can always come back to the concrete materials, even for an abstract concept. Anyway, so it says, this is from The Absorbent Mind. We may put it like this: the child's intelligence can develop to a certain level without the help of the hand. But if it develops with his hand, then the level it reaches is higher and the child's character is stronger. So I really love that, because I do think that I know I myself learn better if I actually, someone can tell me, but if I have to do it, then I'm going to understand it better. And actually also what I love about Montessori is how the older children help the younger children, because I know myself, if I'm explaining a concept to someone else, I have to really, it helps me consolidate my own learning. I can only teach something that I already have mastered, or it helps me master it by teaching somebody else. So that kind of is built into the Montessori approach as well, which I find really beautiful. Yeah. Such a natural way to learn. I don't in my toddler classes, I don't find like I'm going around the classroom teaching the children much. I provide a beautiful, engaging environment for them. And I have other children who are working with this. I can be available to step in when they need some help and then step back again. But I'm not saying, oh, I need to show you this, and look, this is how it's all done. I really feel like the materials can do so much of that natural learning for us. So it's really beautiful to see.
Yeah, especially with the toddlers. They're not so much presentation, because it's like self-explanatory. The first materials are really self-explanatory, and they experience in their own way as well at that age. They don't really do exactly what the material is attended to straight away, or they will discover it after a few trials. How does it work exactly? Yeah, and talking about toddler, I forget to ask you that, but why did you decide to work mainly with the toddlers?
So I love working with toddlers. It was the first age that I was really exposed to this approach, and I just realized I had enormous empathy for them. I really felt like I could see through their eyes and see that they weren't trying to be naughty, but they were just quite misunderstood. And so I really love that they're living in the present moment. Like, they don't notice and make shopping lists for later. They just look at that plant growing up through the pavers, or, you know, they see everything with such an interest and detail and things that I just didn't even notice. And if there's an aeroplane that goes over our classroom, everyone's pointing out the window and I'm like, oh, I didn't even notice. But, you know, they're just very, very aware. And so it helps me stay in the present moment. I like that they're very authentic. There's no like them trying to trick you or them trying to manipulate you in a different way. And I just really like that authenticity. So if a toddler comes up and gives you a big hug, you just know that it comes from deep in their heart. But also if they take some time to warm up with you, I totally respect that too, and just give my distance until they're ready to, you know, come closer. So I think that I just like them as people. I find them super fun to hang out with, and I always learn something from them. So they're good people to be with.
Absolutely. That's my favorite age group as well.
Also, you see such enormous changes with them as well. So babies who can start in our classes, sometimes in 10 weeks, they've started walking. So then they've got 2 hands free. So you see them start to explore their world that way. So it's a fabulous age group. And by the time they're 3, they can tell me everything that they were thinking but couldn't say earlier.
Yeah. Until what age do they stay with you in the classroom when they do the full program?
In the Netherlands, they start school at 4, and so we have children up to 4 years old. So mostly 3, and sometimes kids up to 4.
Yeah, it's similar here in my own play group. They obviously school start at 4 as well in the UK. So yeah, I really like when I have one who starts as a baby and the mom comes with like an 8 months baby, and then I have one at the moment, so she had the second one. So she's coming every week. So basically she has daughters now. It's just over 2. So she started when she was 8 months. So I can see all the progression. It's really lovely to see that little girl is changing, and now I have the baby brother coming as well. So yeah. And do you have a last tip for parents, or your best tip for parents when they want to start Montessori?
Yeah, so for me, it's always seeing through your child's perspective. So if that's one thing that people could take away today, it's like, if they're having a hard time, they're not trying to wind you up, but actually, how can I say, oh yeah, they're really frustrated that didn't fit into the hole. That's why they threw the toy. Or they hit their brother because they were trying to concentrate and they were distracted. Or so it's not saying it's okay, but it's like, at least start first from understanding where they're coming from, and then you can see how you can support them, whether you need to help them make amends, help them calm down, or seeing from their perspective can also be sitting on the floor and how does this room look from their height, because if I make it beautiful and engaging, it's going to be much more attractive than them pulling the cords. You know, toddlers and preschoolers will find anything in their path. So you have to make it really inviting and beautiful. So I think that seeing things from the child's perspective is something that I think is really important. And I think it's actually a way that we'll be more peaceful in the world, a little bit like we were talking about before about, okay, so my daughter wants to go out and I want to keep her safe, you know? So if we can both see each other's perspectives, and I also like to practice that with people who think differently from us, because instead of them thinking that they're an idiot and they're wrong, it's like, oh, tell me more. So that's kind of how I like to see the world.
Yeah, I have to say, you seem so like full of reflection and calm and relaxed. So that's not a question that I had prepared, but I'm curious to know if you want to share that. Do you do anything, to handle your own emotion and to work on yourself? Obviously, your children are older, so you have time, to think about that parenting journey. But, I think that it's, when we work with parents of very young babies or toddlers, they seem to be so, of course, wind up by their children's behavior, or finding that it's difficult, the life with a baby who doesn't sleep through the night, and wondering, okay, what did I put myself into, like with my 2 children under 2, and parenting seems to be so hard when we are in the early years. And personally, I do a lot about, my own emotions and myself, obviously, to be able to handle my own children emotions. But you seem so relaxed and calm, and in general, reading your newsletters and your blog and so on, you seem to not perfect, okay, because I'm sure you're not. But what do you do? what can we advise parents to do, just to be able to cope with all of that?
Yeah, no, I think it's really important. So Dr. Montessori talked about the preparation of the adult and so she was often talking to teachers, but the same thing applies to the parents as well, is that you can't do this approach unless you're relaxed and calm, because if you're tired and you're stretched out, you just don't have the patience to see why they're melting down the floor. So I remember when I was in the middle of my Montessori training and I was like working late at night on my albums, and I just didn't have as much patience during the day for my kids. So it's also like actually recognizing how much can you take on, because when we're overstretched, you can't do as much. I was turning 26 when I had Oliver, and so I've had a lot of time to grow up alongside him. I definitely didn't have everything worked out when he was small at all. I'd hold a bottle for him while he was drinking water, and I really got it all wrong so that I can kind of grow and teach them at the same time as I'm discovering things. And in the last probably 5 years, I've been meditating every day, and meditation just looks like lying in my bed for 10 minutes, but I never fall back to sleep. I have my hand on my heart and I breathe. I do a lot of self-reflection about what is my problem and what are other people's problems, because then I really feel like you can support each other in a better way. So I'm very clear. I'm learning how to set boundaries with people as well. Like, oh, just a minute, that's not my problem, but how can I help you if someone, ever has an issue with you? I think that nature is a big one for me. We went for New Year's Day for a walk along the beach for an hour and a half. And even though it's freezing cold here, we were bundled up with our jackets and our scarves. And then during the walk, it started pouring with rain. And I'm like looking at my teenagers, my girlfriends and boyfriends going, I'm so sorry. And they're like, that's okay, because when we got inside and we had a hot chocolate and some food to warm up, it's like, it's so worth it. It's just really lekker uitwaaien, they say in Dutch, which is like getting rid of all the cobwebs. And yeah, it was like a breath of fresh air through the lungs. So I love spending time in nature. Yeah, it's really true about what they say about having a pause before you react. And that can be so hard, and it's taking me years to perfect. And I get it wrong all the time. But when I remember to like make an observation or to use like a Janet Lansbury kind of sportscasting, like, oh, I see this happened, it just gives me a little bit of moment to kind of like react, not instead of rushing in to react, I can respond better. So I think going back to observation, I mean, that's one of the things I've benefited so much just in my daily life is we did 250 hours of observation, our Montessori training. And so you really observe people, and then you can do self-observation as well, which is really fun. Anyway, there's some kind of things that come up for me, but also my cups of tea.
Yes.
I did remember one thing as well, is that I have a bath every single night. And so that's time when the kids are in bed and I can shut the door and I read books in the bath, and I actually don't read parenting books and things like this. I just read fiction or non-fiction and fill my soul in that way. So I hope that's helpful and it resonates with some people.
It is, and it's great to hear that you do that too, okay? That we do need that too. And it's great as well. It's the same for me to kind of accept that definitely we failed many times when the children were little. We still fail many times, and it still work in the end. I think that, as you say, the main thing is to recognize, when, I should have done that maybe that way. I should have handled that situation that way. So what do I need to be, a better parent tomorrow? Maybe I need a bath, as you say, or maybe I need an early night, or maybe I need, a few hours by myself, and, be able to recognize that and say that it's okay to say, okay, I have some needs. I need to cover for my own needs to be able to handle my children. And I do like a bath every night as well with a book. I read a lot of super easy books to read, fiction. Totally different from parenting book for sure. Well, it was a pleasure to chat with you. I don't know if you have anything else that you want to add. Obviously, I will add all the links to your website and everything, and to the book. I'm sure many of the parents here know you already.
Well, thank you so much. It's been an honor to be part of the conference, and I hope that everyone, gets a few new things that they can start to apply in their home and be inspired by the Montessori approach. So thank you so much.
I'm sure they will. Thank you.